We're about to start the Parsha of Naso, and it's known that the Parsha of Naso is the longest Parsha in the Torah. It's 176 psukim, just like the Tehillim has 176 verses in the capital of Kuf Yotes. The Talmud Baba Basra, the Tractate Baba Basra, has 176 daf. But this week's Parsha of Naso is the longest Parsha, has the longest Medrash, the Zohar is the longest, and it's brought down in some Hasidic works that the idea is that after the Yom Tov of Shavuos, where we receive a special power and energy to study the Torah, so we go the distance this week's Parsha. So now it's a great opportunity to renew our passion and inspiration to study Torah. That's on one side of the coin. And also because, as we know, we study Pirkei Avos during this time in the summer. So after we receive the Torah with all of the do's and the don'ts, so we need to be able to study some laws that will help us exercise some discipline and self-control. So today we're going to explore a interesting passage in the Torah, which is known the section as the Isha Sota, the wayward woman. So the Torah talks about a very tragic scenario where the woman is suspected of straying from her fidelity and commitment to her husband and her family. And in the wording of the Torah, when it seeks to describe this woman, it says, Ish kisista ishto, in a scenario where a man's wife, sista. So sista it means, Rashi brings two explanations. So here, in the second explanation, rather, the word sista is similar to the sin and the samach are, from the Torah's perspective, are interchangeable. They sound similar. So the word sat means to veer or to deviate from a given path. So here, the Torah says that kisista ishta, she is an isha sota because she has deviated from the normative path of fidelity, of commitment to her family, and of modesty. But Rashi brings another explanation that, in fact, the word sista comes from the word shtus, which connotes folly, stupidity. And he brings the Talmud, which explains that famously that ein adam over avera, a person does not transgress and commit an avera, ela im kain nichnas bo ruach shtus, only unless a person, some spirit of folly, of nonsense has entered into their psyche, and that is the reason a person commits an avera. So here we're going to explore this phenomenon today, which, if we are able to figure out the key to solve this dilemma, it will save us a lot of heartache, a lot of hardship. And that's the big question that mankind has been asking since the dawn of civilization. We see many, many people who are intelligent, they are successful, educated, achieved much, accomplished a lot in their lives, and yet, at some point, at some juncture in their life, they make one little mistake, and it seems incredibly stupid, incredibly nonsensical, but with one act, they self-destruct, and their whole life, and their career, and their family, everything implodes and falls apart. It goes back to the very first couple, Adam and Chava. They sinned, and because of that sin, we're actually still paying for it till today. And that's the question, why do people sin? And here the Torah is teaching us an interesting perspective that why do people sin? A person sins because of a ruach shtus. There's a spirit of folly. And the truth is, if you think about it, it seems to be counterintuitive. In fact, we could question why the Torah says that sinning is due to shtus, to folly, to nonsense. It seems to actually mitigate. When you think about a person who's a sinner, many adjectives could come to mind. The person could be malicious, negligent, manipulative, many adjectives could come to mind as to the nature of a sinner. But stupidity is not necessarily something that comes to mind, because if a person is stupid, you can't really fault them. It's hard to have very high expectations from a foolish person, and that seems to already give an excuse and to somehow mitigate the severity of their sin. So why would the Torah give the person an out and say that person really is a smart, intelligent person, makes healthy choices in life, and it was a moment of stupidity? Why would we let that person off the hook? Why wouldn't we really talk about the gravity, the magnitude, the severity, the scope of this person's sin? So we have to explore the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and how exactly he ensnares each and every one of us on a day-to-day basis to follow his designs. In fact, Shlomo HaMelech, when he describes the Yetzer Hara, he calls him Melech Zaken Uksil. He is a fool, which that also seems to raise a question, because we know the Yetzer Hara is very, very sneaky, tricky, manipulative, sly. The way that he gets people to do Averos, he uses every trick in the book. The Talmud says in the tractate of Sukkah, it compares the Yetzer Hara to a zvuv, to a fly. And one of the explanations that's given comparing the Yetzer Hara to a fly is that most other animals, if they're bothering you, if they're interfering with what you're trying to do, you give a clap, you give a zetz, and you're done with it, right? But have you ever tried to catch a fly? Have you ever had these flies flying around in your living room, in your dining room? They are relentless. They are persistent. You give one zetz, and they're flying from one place to the other place. They're impossible to chap. You can't get them. So the Yetzer Hara is quite persistent and relentless in his pursuit. He tries. If he doesn't succeed once, he doesn't just throw in the towel. He is there every single day. You could count on that. But the Yetzer Hara doesn't just try to trap us in a way that, in a manner that is to get us to do a significant, egregious Avera. Sometimes it's something very, very small. All he needs to do is get his foot in the door. As the Talmud famously says, that what is the craft of the Yetzer Hara? Hayom omer lo aseh kach. All he needs to get you to do is to listen to him once. It could be the most minor, small, simple Avera. That's all he needs. Because once he has you in his net, it's very, very hard to get out. It's very, very hard to wiggle free. Because once you listen to him, then he edges, he pushes the envelope just so slightly. And sometimes it's not necessarily even doing an Avera. It's even doing a mitzvah. But if he gets you to listen to him, then you are on a downward spiral, which it's very, very, very hard to shake yourself free. They tell the story of the Baal Shem Tov, who was once with his students, and they were attending a chasana, a wedding, and they were going in this procession towards the chuppah. And as they're making their way to the chuppah, the Baal Shem Tov notices that there was this individual who was sitting in a wagon. And the Baal Shem Tov momentarily breaks off from this procession, and he walks over to this fellow who is in the wagon, and he whispers in his ear a few words. And the person seems to listen to the Baal Shem Tov saying, he nods his head, and the Baal Shem Tov then abruptly returns back to the chuppah procession and continues about his business. And this naturally raises the curiosity of the students, of the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, but they knew they couldn't really get much information from the Baal Shem Tov, so they sought out, the day after the wedding, they sought out which inn this person was staying in, And after much effort, they were able to locate him. And they says, tell us, please, what did the Baal Shem Tov tell you yesterday? At that chuppah, he says, listen, it was something very private between me and the rabbi. I can't really let you in on what we spoke about. And they start pushing and pressing and asking, tell us, what did you hear? What did he speak to you about? We're not leaving. We're not going anywhere until you tell us exactly what happened. So he says, okay, let me tell you. You see, back in my village, I had a very, very good friend. We were friends since the childhood, and we did everything together. And as we grew up, we each went into our own business. So one time, my friend, he would go out, he would travel and peddle his wares, and after a few weeks, he would come back with his profits. So one day, I knew he was coming back from out of town, so I went to his house to welcome him back, say hello, catch up with him. And I come into the house, and it's quiet, and I asked his wife, where is he? She said, he just went out to run a couple errands, he'll be back soon. So meanwhile, I went into his study, and I wanted a chappa, a little cigar, and relax till he came. And as I walk into the room, I notice sitting there, out in the open, is a big purse of money, just sitting right there. And I was really, really upset. You know, I love my friend very, very much. And here he goes out and puts so much time and effort to be able to earn all of this money. And he acted so irresponsibly to lay the money out on the table like this. I thought, I need to teach him a lesson. So I thought I would take this money, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on to it. And when he comes back, he's going to wonder where his money is going to go, and it's going to give him a nice scare, but it'll teach him a very good lesson. He'll know never to be so casual and careless with his possessions. If you have your money, you hide it in a safe, in a very secure place. But I put the purse in my pocket, and I'm waiting around, but he never showed up. So I figured, in the meantime, I had to go do a couple things. I had to check up in my house. I'd step out for a minute, and I planned to come right back. But I got a little bit tied up, and by the time I came back to the house, things really unraveled. He came back to his home. He found out that the money was gone. Shraya, people were screaming and yelling and fainting, and it became a catastrophe, a colossal, crazy situation, and people were crying and screaming, and police were there, and I realized it was not an opportune time. So I figured, I'll come back tomorrow, things will quiet down, I'll sneak in, I'll put the money back. The next day, I come back. Already over there's the collectors and the creditors, everyone's after him. He has his vendors he has to pay back. And it's also, every time I come back to the house, there's people around. I was never able to find an opportunity. Like this, days, weeks go by, it's already a couple months. And I start thinking to myself, I have all this money sitting with me. Well, I'm just going to sit around. I'm looking for the right time to do it. Maybe what I should do is, I'm thinking I should start investing the money. I'll take this money, I'll make a profit. Now, not only will I give him back his money, I'll also give him back extra, the profits that are made. So like this, I'll make him whole. I'll come clean, and he will have no anger, he'll have no issue with me. But then I'm thinking to myself, hang on, I'm going to start with this, go around in town and start throwing around money, making investments. People will get very suspicious. They know I'm not a man of means. I can't do it in this town. I need to go to a different town. I'll go to a different town, different reputation, different mazel. I'll make the money, and then after I make the profit, I'll come back and pay him back. And that's what I did. I took all my possessions, I saddled up my wagon, and I went to another town. And here I am. The next day, I show up into this new town, and what's the first thing I see? A procession of people making their way towards the chuppah. And immediately, the Baal Shem Tov, this rabbi, he peels off from this procession, from this line of people. He walks over to me and he whispers into my ear. He tells me, my dear friend, stop with all your calculations. Don't wait. It's not too late. All you need to do is to go over to your friend and bring him the money and explain to him exactly what happened. You didn't mean to steal. You actually meant to do it for his benefit, but the situation unraveled beyond your control, I'm telling you, he'll believe you. And if you want, you could say, I will be your character witness to vouch for you. That was your true intention. He will believe you. He will forgive you. But don't delay. Don't push it off another day. Go now. So this, we see, is one of the tactics of the Yetzer Hara. It starts with a very, very small little thing. And once you start listening to him, it is very, very difficult to rid yourself of the influence, of the relentless influence of the Yetzer Hara. So that's what the Yetzer Hara is all about. He is someone that is very, very clever. So what are we going to do? How are we going to take him head on? How are we going to solve this issue? So what we need to do is, number one, we need to identify the problem. You see, one of the challenges is that Yetzer Hara is able to put up these smoke screens. He is able to cloud up our judgment. If we could first at least identify and call a spade, we could call the Yetzer Hara for what he is, that will be very, very helpful. They tell the story of Reb Nachman of Breslov. He tells over the story that there was once this, it's a mashal. He would give these parables that were very, very deep, that were understood on many, many levels. He tells the story of there was once a king who had a dream. His dream was that the crop that he had some kind of disease, some infection, and he foresaw that anybody who ate from the crop would become insane. So he calls his senior advisor and he says, what should we do? All of the crops are infected, are infested. We're all going to become crazy. So his advisor says, we still have a little bit of crop left from this year. We'll put aside for me and you. Like this, at least me and you will be sane. The whole world will be crazy, but at least we'll be sane. The king said, first of all, I'm a king. I can't abandon everybody else. Everyone should be crazy and not me. But second of all, what you're saying is very foolish. Because if the whole world is meshuga, me and you are we're gonna be the only ones who are normal. We're gonna be the crazy ones. So the king said, we need to eat this crop. We have to eat the same grain like everybody else. But what we're going to do is, we're going to engrave a mark on my forehead and your forehead, an indelible mark. So like this, after we eat the grain, I will look at your forehead and you will look at my forehead and we'll see that mark. And then we will know at least that we are crazy. We'll know that there's something wrong. This is a very deep story. It can be understood on many levels. But certainly we could say that in our challenges in life, if we at least are able to put a mark and say, when the Yetzer Hara comes to us and we say, this is a shtus, this is a folly, what you're suggesting, what you're proposing right now is utter, complete nonsense. That could be a very, very healthy start in our never-ending tussle and battle with the Yetzer Hara, to be able to, at least once in a while, be victorious and prevail over him. So now here we get into the issue. We see the Yetzer Hara, as we mentioned before, doesn't just try to get us to sin. Chassidim would say that initially the Yetzer Hara comes to us in the guise of a very scary monster, right? We always think of the Yetzer Hara, he is evil, conniving, malicious, and he has his nefarious designs to get us to do the most horrible and horrific things. But oftentimes, when the Yetzer Hara comes in the guise of a monster, he's not successful. He scares everybody off. So what does the Yetzer Hara have to do? He needs to appear like a pious, righteous person. As Chassidim would say, the Yetzer Hara, he's not the Satan, he's not the evil person. He's a tzaddik, he's a sweet guy. He shows up with a talis and a kapata. He doesn't tell you to sin. He actually tells you, do a mitzvah. But what he does is, he says, listen, you want to go and daven tomorrow, sleep in a little bit. You'll have a lot of energy. Miss that minyan because people will disturb you, interfere with your concentration. Better to pray alone. You want to give tzedakah? Don't give tzedakah today, because tomorrow you'll double, you'll give more. You see that person, it's good, speak a little lashon hara about him, because that person's a little out of line. You'll be able to whip him back into shape. You'll teach him a lesson. The Yetzer Hara doesn't try. As the Hayom Yom says, if you want to know if it's a Yetzer Hara or not, the proof is in the pudding. If you ever see that on a level of action, that whatever you're trying to do, the Yetzer Hara is trying to preclude you from doing something positive, even if he's telling you to do something else. If you're in the middle of studying and he tells you, stop studying for a little bit. There's a person out there that could really, really use your help. Now you're going to say, hang on a second. Don't we know that sometimes certain mitzvahs are suspended for others? That is true. But it's important to realize, who are you listening to? Are you listening to the Yetzer Hara, or are you listening to the Yetzer Tov? The Rebbe once told over a story, a fascinating story, of the Chernobyl Rebbe, Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, who was very, very poor, didn't have much materially, and there were a lot of debts that were piling up. And one day, a rather affluent chassid came to the Rebbe, and he gave him 300 silver rubles, which was a substantial amount of money in those days. And the Gabbai, when he heard about this, he was quite happy, because now they could pay off all of their debts. But in the meantime, the Rebbe, he took in other Hasidim, many Hasidim that night, to speak to them about their various issues, materially, spiritually, emotionally, whatever was on their minds. And afterwards, he davened the Ma'ariv service, and then he called in one of the previous Hasidim who were there earlier for an audience, and he called him back into the room. And he was there for a few moments, and then he left. Finally, the Gabbai had the opportunity to go in to the Rebbe, Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, and he's all excited. He's ready to get the 300 silver rubles and start to pay down all of the chayvis, all of the debt. He comes into the room and he sees the Rebbe there, and he says, "Okay, no, let's see it. Let's see the goods." And the Rebbe opens the drawer, and there's only mamish like a few little pennies over there, basically nothing there. And this Gabbai, he is devastated. He says, "1 second, what happened to all that money? There was that big donation that we just got earlier in the evening." So the Rebbe said, "Well, I just gave it to, you saw that chassid who just left 2 minutes ago, I just gave it to him." He says, "I don't understand." He says, "Let me give you a window into my perspective on what happened here this evening. You see, initially, when that previous wealthy chassid came in and he gave this big, large donation, I thought, wow, Hashem, with hashgacha pratis, he wanted to provide and take care and alleviate all of the debts that we have. But as the evening wore on and this chassid came in, I saw, and he told me that the amount that he had many financial challenges, his rent, his daughter was getting married, many financial troubles. And I thought, this chassid could really use this money. And it turned out that the money that he needed was approximately this amount, this 300 silver rubles. And I felt this is the reason, with hashgacha pratis, Hashem decided that I should have this money to be able to help this person facilitate this special mitzvah. And then, as I was about to give him the money, another thought entered my mind. I started to entertain the following notion. It's nice and everything that I want to give one chassid 300 silver rubles. But the truth is, how equitable, how efficient really is that? At the end of the day, there are so many chassidim that have a lot of needs. Why should I give 300 rubles to one chassid? Maybe I should divide it, maybe give him 50 rubles, and like this I could give to 6 chassidim 50 silver rubles. Again, 50 silver rubles is a nice sum. nothing to sneeze at. Why should I give him all 300? So I had before me this dilemma, 300 to 1 or 50 to 6. But then I had to give myself a litmus test, because at the end of the day, what it comes down to is which intention, which motive, which path is more pure, more sincere. What is the right thing to do? So I came to the following determination. I said to myself, if the right thing to do was to give 50 rubles to 6 Hasidim, why didn't I think of that right away? Why wasn't that my first thought? Why wasn't that my first instinct, my first reaction? It must be that my first reaction actually came from the Yetzer Tov, to give 300 to one guy. But what happens is, the Yetzer Hara, as soon as he sees that I want to give all 300 to this guy, he's getting nervous. This is not right, 300 to one guy. He wanted a little something for himself. But he's not going to come and say, keep all 300 for you. You have your own financial hardships and burdens. Give it all to him. He's not going to do that because he knows I'll never go for it. I'll be able to see flat out that what he's trying to do, and I'll shut him down right away. So what does he do? He says, you have to be more efficient, more fair with your Hasidim. You could do a lot more with 50 to 6 than 300 to 1. And that's why I had that second intuition, a second thought, to be able to now share and give to 6 people. If that was from the Yetzer Tov, why didn't I think of that right away? It must be that the Yetzer Hara caught on to something that's going on and tried to torpedo the purity, the sincerity of my intent, and at least get his finger in it. Maybe I'd be able to get 50 rubles for myself. But it was under the camouflage, under the guise of doing something very noble, very righteous and selfless. The Rebbe said, this teaches us, it's not just simple people like me and you who struggle with ordinary temptations and challenges. Even tzaddikim, even the most holy and righteous people, they also have to contend with the Yetzer Hara. But in their case, the challenges they have are more subtle, they're more sublime, more lofty, but Yetzer Hara nonetheless. So what does the Yetzer Hara do? We see from here is that he's not just trying to heighten, as we typically think, the Yetzer Hara attempts to heighten the dimensions of our lust and pleasure to do an Aveira. What the Yetzer Hara does is something far more nefarious, far more sneaky. What he does is, he tries to inject, you see, if it's just about pleasure and temptation, so then it's intellect versus temptation versus lust. And ultimately, Moach Shalat al Halev, the intellect, should be able to control the passions of the heart. But the Yetzer Hara does is, he also tries to inject logic over here. So now it's logic versus logic. What he says is, what you're doing over here is not an Aveira. It's actually a mitzvah. What you're doing here is not evil. It's actually something good. It's something holy. It's something positive. And now that is a far more difficult and tricky situation. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what's good, what's bad, what's black, what's white. It's very, very sticky. Very, very tricky. And therefore, on the one hand, we see the Yetzer Hara seems to be very, very wise, very cunning, very sly. But yet, the Yetzer Hara is really a fool. This is all Ruach Shtus. Because at the end of the day, this attempt to, the reason why we call this a Ruach Shtus, it's not just because it's stupid, it's foolish to throw your whole career, your whole life away for small little things. As we mentioned before, you don't have to look far. Every single day we read stories, we hear about stories, people who built up such successful lives and beautiful families and careers, and one little thing and they throw everything away. Over there, the stupidity is in the consequence. The aftermath is foolish. You threw it all away. But here, it's more than that. It's what instigates. The reason you do the Avera is foolish in itself. Because what is the Yetzer Hara trying to say? What you think is bad is really good. What you think is evil is really holy. That premise in itself is the most absurd and nonsensical thing. How will something as foolish as that ever be good? There's only tragedy, misery, and suffering in the end. This false hope, this what the Yetzer Hara is trying to sell you, can only end in failure. And that's why it's important to call the Yetzer Hara a fool, because we have to realize that when he comes to you and starts to sell you a story, tell you that what you should do this mitzvah, do that mitzvah, you need to call him out and say, shtus, this is folly, this is crazy, I can't do this. So this is one level, what the Yetzer Hara tries to do. He tries to take good and camouflage and masquerade as something good and positive. But there's another dimension, which the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, the idea of Ruach Shtus. And he says, what the Yetzer Hara does is, in addition to trying to use all of his tactics to get us to sin, he does another thing. He tries to minimize, he tries to mitigate the severity of what we're doing. He basically tries to impress upon us that there are certain things that we do, even if you do it, it's not that bad. Nothing terrible will happen. You do this little Avera, your family will understand, your wife will understand, they'll forgive you. You could do it and you'll get away with it. The Alter Rebbe says this concept is very, very dangerous, because ultimately, every single command from Hashem, every single Avera, or every single mitzvah that we violate, that we transgress, is a major slap in the face to Hashem. Because ultimately, with every single Avera that a person commits, he severs the connection to Hashem. It could be the most smallest and the most minute thing. And this is the folly. This is the nonsense of the Yetzer Hara. Because if we would truly be cognizant of the fact that every single act that we do that is against Hashem's will actually severs the cord, we would never do it. As he gives the classic example, how many people do we know throughout history who violated every single Avera in the Torah? Yet, when it came down to the question, when their back was against the wall, and they were under the pain of death, they were told, either give up your faith, bow down to the Avodah Zarah, or you will forfeit your life. The overwhelming majority were Moser Nefesh. They sacrificed their lives al Kiddush Hashem. Which tells us that when it came down to the question of their identity and the essence of their connection to Hashem, there was no way they could say, in the words of the Alter Rebbe, a Yid, in Yiddish, he says, Niter ken, a Jew not he can, nit will nit, does not want to uprisen, to tear themselves, to rip themselves away from Hashem. Not only does the Jew not want, he can't, he physically can't do it. You can't cut yourself off from yourself. It's a physical impossibility. So that comes out, so we see from here is that a Jew will never sever their connection from Hashem. If that is the case, there's a tremendous stupidity, there's a tremendous folly in committing any Avera. Because if every Avera is essentially a micro version of serving Avodah Zarah, of detaching yourself from Hashem, why do people commit these Averas in the first place? How do you commit Averas on the one hand and give up your life for Hashem? There could only be one answer. It is the obfuscation, it is the confusion, it is the fog, the smokescreen of the Yetzer Hara, which he basically tries to paint a scenario where you could eat not kosher and you'll still be okay. You could not keep the Shabbos, you'll still be okay. Avodah Zarah, he would never suggest. The Yetzer Hara knows he'll never be successful in that. But he slowly chips away at these little things to mitigate the harshness, the magnitude of these sins, the gravity of all of these averas. But that is the most incredibly nonsensical proposition ever. And therefore, when the Yetzer Hara comes and tries to convince you, we need to scream out, shtus, this is crazy. What you're saying is actually illogical. I should commit this sin because this doesn't sever me from Hashem, and this one does. Why is there any difference? Every mitzvah is from Hashem. Every time you do something against Hashem's will, you are saying to Hashem, I don't want you in this. This is not your space. You don't belong in my life. Would a person ever consciously, knowingly say that? Of course not. It's only because it's not so stark, it's not in your face. So a person is a lot more nonchalant, a lot more casual. So this truly brings to the fore what the Yetzer Hara is all about. It's the Ruach Shtus. Okay, so we've diagnosed some of the problems over here, but what is the solution? How are we able to extricate ourselves from this? There was once a fellow who was trying very hard to lose weight. Whatever he did, he tried all of the books, this diet, that doctor, this video, he tried it all, cardio, exercise, whatever he could, he just was not able to kick it. He was not able to get rid of his weight problem. So finally, after much research, he found out there was a special guru, there was a special person who was known to be the best, the top in his field. And he worked with him, and finally, over time, with much effort, was able to shed 150 pounds. It was amazing, life-changing. However, he always had this weakness for the cheesecake. As we know from Shavuos, not an easy thing to just ignore. It's there. One time he was by a function, and as he's walking by the Viennese table, it's there, it's staring at him, it's calling his name. Come over, please, have a slice. And he's using every fiber of his being to exercise self-control and discipline, but he feels he's losing it, it's slipping away. And he doesn't know what to do. So he calls his sponsor, he calls his person, and he says, please help me. I'm losing it. I'm about to succumb to my baser, lower self. So his instructor, his coach, starts telling him, if you're going to eat that cheesecake, you're going to go back to the old you. It's not good. You're going to have low self-esteem. It's going to be unhealthy, and the cholesterol, and you're going to have a million problems. And he's describing him all of the terrible things that will happen to him. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't moving the needle. Finally, the mentor, the guru, says, I have an idea. This is what you need to do. I need you to go into the kitchen, and in the kitchen, I want you to go find a piece of deli, like a good piece of corned beef. Eat it and come back to me, and I'll tell you what to do next. He says, okay, if that's what you say. Goes into the kitchen, takes a piece of pastrami with corned beef, and he eats it, and he comes back to the phone, and then all of a sudden, it hits him like a bolt of lightning. Now, there's no way he could eat the cheesecake. He's flashing. It's done. It's a done deal. He came to appreciate, how do you get rid of your inclination? You do not let the person in the door in the first place. As soon as you hear the seduction, the temptation, as soon as it begins to try to creep and get their foot, even the smallest little crack, you have to shut it down right away. Because otherwise, once that person gets the smallest corner, the smallest edge, puts their foot in, you're finished. Reb Meir Primishlan, he said once a mashal. There was once this fellow who was an alcoholic, and this person struggled mightily. And it came to a point, his wife said, listen, you got to make a choice. It's either me or the bottle. Either you kick your habit or you're not coming home tonight. We're done. So he realized it got very, very serious. And that's it. No more drinking, cold turkey. That day he leaves his house, and all of a sudden a burning desire, a burning temptation. He needs to have a drink. He starts walking towards his local pub, but halfway there he said, I can't do this. My wife, my family, this is, it's not worth it to throw it all away. And so he starts walking back home, and it's tough. He's walking back. Should I go, not go? In the end, he gives up. He says, that's it. I need to pull through for my family, for my life, my career. And he goes back home. As he walks in the door, there's a mirror. There's this nice big mirror in the foyer of his home. And he looks at himself and he admires, wow, what an impressive person. For such a chush of a person like me, who exercised such amazing self-control, for someone like me, I deserve a good drink. And so he walks over to the fridge and he takes out a bottle of vodka, and he takes a drink, l'chaim, to the person who exercised such amazing self-control. You see, that's what the Yetzer Hara does. It could, sometimes you think it's a head-on collision, he's trying to undermine you. But he doesn't give up. He is relentless. And therefore, you can't engage in a battle. You can't have a confrontation with Yetzer Hara every single day, and he gets into your mind. You need to push him away, as the Alter Rebbe says, Doche b'shtei yadayim. You need to push him away, because if he even gets in just one time, it is quite incredibly difficult. We'll conclude with a story with the Maggid of Mizrich, who a chassid once came over to him and said, Rebbe, tell me, I don't understand. You speak about how we need to exercise self-control and discipline and all of that. I understand. When Hashem commands, you shouldn't physically do an Aveira. You should not murder. You should not steal. I understand. In the realm of action, a person could physically hold themselves back from doing something wrong. I understand in the realm of speech, a person should not speak negatively about another person. More difficult than the world of action, but at least in speech, you shut your mouth, keep it closed. What I don't understand is thoughts. You keep on telling us how we have to have control of our thoughts, to think only positive thoughts and positive emotions. How could a person control the things that they think about, the emotions that they harbor within themselves? It seems to be a little bit far-fetched. It seems almost impossible. So the Maggid told him, well, in order to learn this, I have a chassid, I have a disciple, his name is Reb Zev Wolf of Zhitomir. You go to him, and he'll explain you everything you need to know. And so, this chassid, he travels far away in the Russian winter, a distance of a few weeks, to Reb Wolf of Zhitomir, to seek some insight and perspective in the Maggid's teachings. He finally arrives into the town. It's late at night, cold, dark, wintry night, and there's only one home that the light is on. So he assumed this is probably the chassid. Who else is studying so late at night? And he comes up to the home, and he looks inside. Indeed, there's a very righteous, pious-looking person bending over some svarim by candlelight. And he goes to the door and he knocks on the door. He knocks once and twice. There's no answer. He knocks again and again and again, and it's quite cold, bitter cold. It's dark, late at night, and he starts knocking more intensely. But the chassid's not answering. There's no response. And he's sitting there the entire night, shouting and banging on the door, and nobody's answering. Finally, it's the next morning, and all of a sudden, the door opens up, and there he is. There's a chassid smiling at him, welcoming him, Shalom Aleichem, Reb Yid, and he lets him into the home. Come inside. You look a little cold, a little frostbitten, yeah? And come in, please. Have a nice warm glass of tea. Take your boots off, relax, warm yourself up, and gives him something to eat. A little while later, he says, tell me, Reb Yid, what brings you to my home? Where are you from? He says, well, I was in Mezrich, far away. So why are you here? He says, well, I came here because our teacher, the Magid, Reb Dov Ber, he said that I could learn from you a special lesson in serving Hashem. How is it that we are able to, it is within our capacity to be able to control our thoughts, our mind, which is constantly, our conscious is streaming thoughts a whole day. How can we take control of what we think, of what we feel? So the chassid, Reb Zev, says, well, I thought you learned that lesson right away when you were outside. He said, you see, your mind and your heart is your home, just like we're in this home right here. You are no less a master and an owner of your heart and your mind as you are the master of your physical home. And here you see, when it comes to your home, you don't let anybody in. You decide who comes in, who stays outside. So too, when it comes to your heart and it comes to your mind, that which is positive, productive, healthy, holy, spiritual, that you let in. But if you have something that's negative, unholy, not positive, not productive, you are the balabas, you are in charge. You simply keep the door locked. So, in summation, we learned about the Yetzer Hara, about the Ruach Shtus, the wayward woman, which teaches us, as the Rebbe once explained, that the Chazal studied and interpreted and saw within the wayward woman, even though it seems to be a very isolated circumstance, a question of fidelity in a relationship between a man and a woman, and yet our sages sees that as a microcosm of not just the folly in the relationship, in the fealty between a man and woman, but it's actually a microcosm of every single mitzvah, every single avera. They see in that Ruach Shtus. Why did the Chachamim derive the Ruach Shtus to teach us that every sin is a folly, is a stupidity? Why did the Chachamim see that in the story of the Isha Sota? Because ultimately, our relationship with Hashem is mirrored in the relationship between man and woman. And thus, every single infraction, every single misstep can only pull us further apart. And thus, even the smallest little thing to do that is another chink in the armor, is another severed cord in a relationship. And no matter what the various tactics of the Yetzer Hara are, if we can at least point to one strategy. Number one, we need to realize, call it for what it is. Shtus, folly, nonsense. Number two, if we feel that we are being attacked by the Yetzer Hara, never let him in. Don't even if it sounds holy and pious, as we mentioned before, it's important to know his game plan, learn his strategy. And if we see he's there Don't play his game. Because the best thing is not to get entangled. It is to dismiss it, dead on arrival. And finally, we need to realize the magnitude of our actions. To realize, as the Alter Rebbe teaches us, every mitzvah that we do strengthens our connection to Hashem, brings us closer. And thus, the opposite is true as well. Every single avera, every single deed that we do has cosmic repercussions. We know in the story of Yosef, the Rebbe would talk about how Yosef was all alone in Mitzrayim. His family gives up on him, sold him as a slave. He was without prospects, without a future, and he was subject to the most relentless and almost insurmountable challenge with the advances and the seduction of the wife of Potiphar. And the Chazal tell us that Yosef was literally on the verge of throwing in the towel. But Rashi brings from the Talmud and Sota that he sees the visage, he sees the image of his father Yaakov. And that was a game changer. And the Rebbe says, what's this visage of Yaakov? I mean, everyone has these images. Did Esav, before he sinned, maybe he saw, did he see Avram? Did he see his parents? What does it help? So he saw the image of Yaakov. And the Rebbe explains, as the Talmud tells us in Baba Basra, that the beauty of Yaakov was the beauty of Adam Rishon. Yaakov had a physical similarity, a physical semblance to Adam Rishon, but it was also spiritual. When Yosef saw the visage, the image of Yaakov, he saw the image of Adam. He came to the realization, how did we get into this mess in the first place? As we mentioned before, the very, very first sin at the dawn of creation, the beginning of mankind. Adam, it seems, failed to appreciate, he failed to understand. There's no such thing as a small sin. There's no little thing you eat, a simple little fruit from the Eitz Hadas, and that's it. It's harmless. In fact, what does the Yetzer Hara tell him? He doesn't tell him do something bad. He says it's for your benefit. You'll come out better. You'll be wiser. But Adam fails to understand that there's no small little actions. Every action is cosmic. We're all interconnected. And thus his sin continues to echo and reverberate throughout history, till to this very day. So Yosef, when he sees the visage of Yaakov, he sees Adam. He comes to realize it's not just me in a little corner somewhere in Egypt, a little transaction, something will happen here, no one will care about it, no one will know about it. No. What I do and what I don't do, it matters. It's important. It matters not just to me, it matters to the entire humanity, the entire world. So we need to remember that when sometimes we feel alone and isolated or lonely, and we have a temptation or we have a challenge that we need to overcome, we look at that image, we look at the visage of Yaakov, we come to appreciate that what we do, yes, maybe if it was small and consequential, but remember that every deed, every action has enormous, unbelievable consequences, ramifications. We will then choose to act judiciously and act in a way that will be productive for ourselves and our family. So I'd like to wish you all a Shavua Tov, a great week, and